Thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to share this information with us. I'm Steve Champness, and president of the Atlanta Aero Club. I've met Rusty before, so I recognize him. Could you introduce yourselves?
My name is Roger McIntyre. I'm the Director of Operations at Surgere.
I'm Bill Wappler. I'm CEO.
My name's Rob Fink. I'm the Chief Strategy and Innovation Officer here at Surgere.
And of course, I'm good little old Rusty.
It's so nice to meet you all, and the plan is to learn more about Surgere and the products and the services you offer, and translate that information and make it available to the aviation industry that we reach through the Atlanta Aero Club and the National Aeronautics Association. We have speakers that come in every other month from around the country, around the world. And so we've got a nice following. And our webinar series ended up bringing us visitors from dozens of countries around the world that we would have never imagined reaching. In this day and age where supply chain is the hottest topic in America, this is really a timely subject to bring attention to the supply chain visibility that your products would offer an aviation company or an airline. Do you mind expanding on that a little bit, on how an overview of Surgere and how this came to be?
First of all, I would believe that most folks just simply don't understand supply chain. Within the world, the very largest companies certainly have supply chain departments, directors, they have practitioners, they're well versed in supply chain operations, and they're quite familiar with the battle that's raging. But when you think about it, particularly in Tier 1 and Tier 2 supplier levels, there's a lack of expertise. And that's natural, right? And if you go beyond that, we have the entire population, it seems, watching the news in the evening, and we're being told that we're not going to be able to buy Christmas presents for our children because of supply chain. And so I like to at least start by saying that supply chain is, in my mind, a dance. And through the years, people have learned to work with, whether it's their client or their suppliers, in a very intimate way. And so they've practiced the dance routine over and over and over. They know how to purchase and support each other. They know all of the intricacies simply because they've been doing it for a long time. And then that dance, if you will, becomes then choreography. Now we have a lot of businesses doing that. And for a supply chain to work on a global basis, really it is, if you will, choreography in large numbers. And so what's happening today is that the choreography had been working quite well. If we just take, as an example, the port of Los Angeles or go beyond that, typically there are 2 ships in waiting. I read something yesterday where Long Beach had approximately 103 ships in waiting, and they're going to wait a little longer because even if you pull them up to dock, there's nowhere to put the containers because the containers haven't been removed. The warehouses that they would go to are full. There aren't the trucks in capacity to move them off. And the rail cars in Joliet, Illinois, as an example, one of the largest rail yards in the United States, had a number of trains backed up for 25 miles waiting to unload cargo. So unfortunately, that means that, in fact, we're probably not going to have all of the Christmas presents that we would like to purchase. But more importantly, I think we all have to understand that the choreography is just not working right now. Someone's changed the tune, and we're all moving in different directions. And that to me is, in my mind, the simplest terms of what I see our problem to be, is that the choreography is broken. Now, our role in this is pretty simple. Steve, we do something, quite frankly, that no one else really does to our level, and that is we identify where things are, we locate them, and provide then transactions that we're aware of through that identification and location methodology. We operate at a level of accuracy that, quite frankly, is unheard of. And so that, if you will, becomes a pretty important, if not urgent, part of solving the supply chain issue, because you're not going to do well if you don't know where everything is. So that's really our role.
Well, it's amazing to me. You have such a good overview of what's happening, probably better than the people in many places that control this, control these factors. They don't seem to have the big picture, and they blame one aspect of it or another. And it seems to me if the traditional supply chains are inoperative, rail, truck, whatever other means there is, that might leave an opportunity for the aviation industry to pick up some of that business too, or to focus on there. Several airlines, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Steve, I was just going to say, relative to your point, I have a friend that runs the global supply chain for a multi-billion-dollar part supplier just down the road from us. And they are renting a 747 at $1 million a day to answer what you just spoke to.
Well, this is something totally unexpected, but necessity is the mother of invention, isn't it? So you know, there's another company, one of our member companies, Phoenix Air, that will, in all likelihood, will see this and has also been on a webcast, and Rusty and I have talked about it. And they operated a 747 to bring Americans home at the beginning of the pandemic around the world. You may remember in Long Beach or Ontario Airport when that 747 came in and landed, they chartered that and many others and brought home 60,000 Americans from countries all around the world. That type of capability, those type of entrepreneurs in aviation should be jumping on this opportunity. And it seems to me they would need to contact you to find out where those breakdowns are. Some of the airlines that are trying to get ahead of the pandemic supply chain, not even including this current supply problem, by placing orders ahead of time with aircraft manufacturers. So we're keeping it in the aviation area. But how does pre-ordering planes and parts affect the supply chain from your perspective?
Yeah, I think, Steve, one of the ways to answer that is when you think about technology that really shows you where your inventory is at. As people expand their inventories, they're expanding where they place that inventory. They're going into more warehouses. So as they continue to expand the use of warehouses, they continue to expand where those things are within their systems, and that's where breakdowns start occurring. One of the great things about technology is that we actually can still show you where that's at. So as you expand out into more areas of warehouse and more warehouses, it really just brings more sharper focus into what we do as a company. We can show you where that is. We can give you that visibility and give you the traceability.
Yeah, I mean, even in times of normal production, locating parts critical for manufacture can be a challenge. So to Rusty's point, as more inventory is taken on, that journey in terms of being able to find a part efficiently becomes much more difficult for those manufacturers, whereby that's where we can help, bringing that question in terms of where is this exact material at this exact point in time. We can transform that into a relatively easy answer back to that customer and provide precise XYZ coordinates for critical materials.
And Steve, when you think about repair stations, repair stations are asking clients, hey, get a little bit ahead of that 500 hour, get a little bit ahead of that 1,000 hour, and give us more time. So as they leverage time and they get things on order earlier, again, it exacerbates, if that material shows up on time, now you have sit in storage longer, and now you still have the same core issue. Where is it at? Do we have traceability? Do we have the paperwork? So we actually help with all those.
And I think building on that is everything Rusty and Rob said also helps your manpower efficiency. Manpower is a shortage, as we all know today. So the more efficient and the more visibility and accurate data you get, you don't have the manpower being inefficient in their process, and you might not need as many. So I think it kind of transpawns right over into how do I manage my manpower in my warehouses or in my repair stations.
All of those issues have been magnified in the last month or two. The message we hear is Christmas presents may be late, but I think it's a much deeper meaning. That means get ready for no parts for your cars, for your house, for your air conditioning systems. Everything we rely on is going to be impacted. And it seems to me Surgere is in a unique position to help alleviate bottlenecks in a normal market, but even more so now. I'm not sure what FIFO concerns are. Could you explain that to me, to the layman's terms? FIFO concerns and how helping to alleviate bottlenecks with your technology?
Sure, happy to, and these guys will certainly add on, where necessary. But FIFO, or first in, first out, is really, predicated on, making sure we're preserving part quality. So making sure what is first in is first out, so that we don't have aged inventory being shipped out into the supply chain. So, and again, that goes back to our point in terms of being able to finitely locate not just the whereabouts of parts within a warehouse or a production facility, but being able to tie critical genealogy data back to those parts, such as production date. So now when I'm able to fuse production date with localization, that FIFO concern becomes a lot easier for someone to manage. They can very quickly understand, what do I have, what were the production dates of that material, and therefore what needs to be shipped in what order.
Well, that makes it more understandable to me. First in, first out is what that stands for, FIFO. And how can Aero supply chains be improved in this market by linking communities through your system of suppliers? How does that work?
That's a really good question. I think one of the fundamental issues with the supply chain is that, it's in essence reactionary. Part of the reason why, there's so much delay in moving material from A to B is that when there is an issue, it's not caught in a predictive fashion. The supply chain's reacting to that problem. So one of the ways in which Surgere and our software suite helps our customers, and therefore the community, is by making those issues known before they're reactionary. It's infusing that predictive element into that supply chain so that we understand there's critical part shortages and we understand where those exist prior to those shortages creating massive problems in the supply chain.
If I take that just one step further, it comes back to what the definition of community is for us, and what the definition of community is to the supply chain, and more specifically what that means to aerospace. So a community in the supply chain would be a number of suppliers that are supplying to an entity, and that may be an airline, it may be a part assembler. It could be a number of different scenarios, but the point that we've been making for some time now is that fundamentally you cannot manage a supply chain if you do it as a standalone enterprise. You and your suppliers, you and your business partners have to be connected in a much deeper way. Now, for us, we do that by sharing a single technology that everyone works from, so that everyone has visibility and transparency to what everyone else is doing. So when Rusty is sending me parts, I see Rusty getting ready to send them. I see Rusty moving them to a dock door, onto a truck, or whatever mode that is. I see then that truck moving to the business partner. I see the business partner accepting them and then moving them into warehouse and perhaps even to assembly. So if you then engage that same theory among many suppliers, then the transparency and visibility is one of the most important ways to overcome supply chain problems. And in aerospace, that has a much deeper meaning because, as you know, in aerospace, the traceability of a part is so critical. Well, fundamentally, if I start with the supplier and I begin that traceability at the source, that gives me a much better opportunity to engage the model you were just bringing up, which is, look, we lived on just in time for a long time. Our marching orders were to remove unused stock and reduce that amount of capital expense that's standing, right? That just in time, everyone in aerospace was working on that principle. Well, now we're seeing that supply chain moves slowly. It can be interrupted. There's a lot of problems that are happening. So to your point, we're seeing people order to deepen their level of inventory. And that gives them a contingency to work from. Two principles come into play when you do that. One is it becomes much more important to know whether that is viable product. So did it come from where we thought it did? And can we prove it? Number two, to Rob's point, are we moving it correctly in first out? Are we associating any quality issues that might be associated to the levels of inventory? Are we moving them correctly? Are they staged correctly? Are they in the right place? All of those decisions come from visibility and transparency into systems and, if you will, community to community interaction. That's what we do.
A lot of things happen from the time that your supplier ships that product to you. Now people will know, companies will know what's happening to their purchased product en route and where it is and why it's delayed and if it's delayed and what conditions it may have encountered. It might be caught in a traffic jam or something else, or it may have been compromised, may have been damaged en route. They would know that, wouldn't they?
They would indeed.
Aviation, it's critical to trace back every nut and bolt back to its source of origin, and it has to be made of to a certain quality, a certain standard of certain materials. And so this is really a very important in aviation, that capability.
And the thing that I would add is when you think about disruption and you think about things that halt the movement of material, to your point, it occurs. And that's one of the great things about Interius, our software, is we have built-in intelligence so that we can look at those things from a business rule perspective that are important. So those are the kind of things that we would notify out to a client to say, this one is one you need to go take notice of. Likewise, as many things occur, how do you get back to a workable solution? The thing that Roger was talking about a few moments ago, obviously labor is an issue. So how do you actually get the actionable intelligence down to where the labor that you have can manage those supply chains? So it's important to have a good system as we use IoT to drive a lot of this information into a system, then to actually use that system to give you that good intelligence.
That was leading up to the next question, which all the industries in America are suffering a labor shortage of some sort. For whatever the reasons, there is one, and people are not returning to work in the numbers they used to. How can technology be leveraged to make existing workers that we do have more efficient and safer?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think it starts with efficiency. That's kind of been an overarching theme of this conversation, but IoT technology and technology in general, when deployed correctly, can infuse a great amount of efficiency into an organization, specifically a supply chain organization. If we minimize issues, we can maximize the efficiency of the workforce. And that's exactly where our technology comes into play, is by being able to minimize issues and minimize disruptions. We're making sure that the resources that are available to work are focused on value-add activities. And we're minimizing the resource pool needed for what we'll call non-value-add activities.
Yeah, I think you can tie that into previous conversations about FIFO, but there's also shelf life. shelf life might be the same as FIFO, because if a product doesn't have the duration that it's able to be used, then we have to be able to notify that and identify that and attributes we would get from that supplier. All that data can be loaded into our system, basically allows us to trigger when things need to be pulled versus a FIFO. So it gives both avenues depending on what data, but that also gives you the ability to predict and plan your work in a warehouse, knowing what you have to do and what you have to get. You're not running around trying to find the wrong part. So having that good data attributes within the system and tied to that part or that consumable that has a shelf life is very important in the aerospace industry.
I can give you an example of what resource issues can do to disrupt business that's only 2 days old. So I was talking to the CEO of an aerospace supplier just 2 days ago, who said that, you know, all of the technology that we can bring to bear, whether it's at the warehouse or wherever it might be in the supply chain, that gives him the advantage of knowledge is important, but really what was most important to him was people. And the story that he was sharing is that he doesn't know when parts are necessarily coming to him from Mexico. He just doesn't know. So what he does is he has extra people that are doing things waiting for those trucks to back up to the door. So he's spending a lot of money because he's now upping the wage scale of his employees, and they're not productive. And so having that knowledge, first of all, was important, but secondarily, and maybe most important, is that when that truck door opens and they start unloading product, he had to have a number of employees standing by to break down that product, list it, right? And then manually enter it into his warehouse system so that he could take receipt of that product. And what he really wanted to know, and of course the answer is yes, but what he really wanted to know is, can we short stop all that manual activity and deploy technology to if not replace his resources, but to better utilize them at the right time? And so your question, I think, is pertinent for everyone in aerospace today. There's just not enough people. And so what points can technology play to not necessarily replace, but better utilize the people you have so that you can continue operations?
Yeah, and maybe to provide a definitive example of that, I think Bill touched on a good point in terms of what automation can do to answer that question of workforce efficiency. There's certain things that are required to take place in the supply chain, such as cycle counting. And cycle counting, parts in a warehouse without technology could be an endeavor that lasts days, can go over the course of a weekend to get a complete inventory. But however, when you do that with IoT technology, that same cycle count with greater accuracy can be achieved in hours. So that's a direct example of how exactly IoT technology can infuse some more efficiency into the workforce.
And I would add, from a labor standpoint, one of the things that we've done a lot of is we think a lot about the user interface. So does the labor want to interact and react? So as we automate and make things simpler, what we've done is really in Interius has made that interface with the operator so simple to use and so easy to use and quite frankly so cool to use. The labor wants to use it because it's a new, different way of doing the same type work, but in a way that's a lot more efficient and at the end of the day a lot more accurate, which goes right back into your planning systems, which really gives you the confidence or assurance of supply and you can build.
Well, this next question relates to the business jet companies that are out there, but it also could relate to companies that are manufacturers like Boeing and Airbus that do a lot of that just-in-time ordering. And so they wouldn't have a lot of money spent on inventory sitting on their shelves. They would wait till they were along in the production line process and then order it because they'd always get it the next day. But all of that's out the window now. And now there's no real predictability. There's no security. And only the companies that have planned ahead are still able to go uninterrupted. So the question is, business jet companies utilize small regional airports, and how do they manage available inventory in order to meet the needs of their customers?
Yeah, I think a lot of that answer is not different than what we've been talking about. So in the case of a small regional airport, obviously they know the type clients that they have, they know the type aircraft that they're typically servicing, they know the type replacements that they are typically doing with LRUs or whatever the required service is. So they're really trying to stretch and get ahead of that now and go out and place orders so that they have inventory available. And again, from our technology standpoint, we're really giving them the confidence that their inventory is accurate. So, you know, if there's in a small regional airport, if they keep 10 in stock, they know there's 10 there, they can see it real time, and they can know that it's available for use. Likewise, if they see spikes coming as clients put in more orders or they see aircraft coming in, they know what their residual inventory is for AOGs and those type things. So anytime that you take accuracy and put it into the picture of inventory, you really gain a lot of confidence with the aircraft coming in for maintenance. So it really helps them plan more efficiently.
So if you know your parts are coming in and your airplane's there, you know you can get that system fixed, adjusted, replaced, whatever it needs to be. Your people are in the right place at the right time when they can be utilized if they're using your system. So you don't have people standing around waiting while you're wishing that the stuff would come in that you are waiting for. We had an example here in Georgia, William, and that General Motors down the road had a production line and it had 1,000 people working there, and a part of the production line broke and everything ground to a halt. You had 1,000 people standing there and they had no idea when that part was coming in. With your system, you would be able to track those things much more accurately.
Yeah, it's all about assurance, right? To know where it's at. If you take a practical example, if you're in a repair station or you're in a small regional airport and there's a work order that's got to get accomplished and there's 6 components that it takes to accomplish that work, we roll that right back to the community side of it. So if you create the technology within the community, you can look at those 6 components coming in. You can know at that convergence point when you actually can release that work out to the shop floor. And likewise, if you can't release that work to the shop floor, now you can probably predict, again, using some of the software that we have in Interius, you can kind of predict where and when that will come so that you can rebalance and reschedule in a lot more efficient manner as opposed to the ways that we're trying to do it today. And quite frankly, the way that planners and dispatchers are doing, basically calling suppliers and logistics companies trying to find out, did it ship, where is it at, when is it coming in, so they can get those work orders released out on the floor.
Major companies hate to leave their aircraft at these repair stations for days and weeks waiting for parts. And this would be a really valuable tool for companies that fix $60 million jets, so they could schedule that aircraft in when they can actually work on it with what they need.
Yeah, and Steve, as you know, there's so many logistics providers out there and so many companies that actually warehouse parts for many different aircraft manufacturers at different mod levels and different requirements. And again, getting visibility to that and knowing exactly where it's at, knowing how to quickly and efficiently pull it and pick it from one of these intermediaries and getting it out to shipment, it really just makes the whole supply chain work more efficient.
And so how would a company get more information from Surgere relating to their needs, whether it be a major airline or an FBO that we reach in the aviation community? How would they reach you, Rusty? And William, what's the best way to get an analysis? Would you do a review of their supply chains?
First of all, the person that's responsible for that part of the conversation happens to be sitting right next to me. Rob Fink owns all of marketing and business development, client relationships, all of that rests on Rob's shoulders. He's probably the first person I'd want to call. After that, I would say anybody in our company would be very happy to take a call and help people through. But if I look at it from an operational standpoint, how do we engage, right? Generally speaking, after we get to know someone a little bit over Teams or something like that, we'll parachute engineers into a facility and start to really gain our own knowledge about how they operate and where their problems are. And we do that, Steve, specifically because the vast majority of our clients really don't know where their problems are. Now, they can speak to us about where they may feel pain, but that doesn't mean that the pain that they feel is directly correlated to what they think the problem is. Many times that's not the case, right? We've been talking as an example about supply chain and fixing supply chain. Well, that automotive manufacturer you were talking about in Georgia just a little bit ago, we have a lot of automotive clients, and I can tell you that quite often when a line goes down, they don't really know if they have that part on site or not, and many times they do. And so it isn't that they don't just know where the truck is. The fact of the matter is they don't even know if it's in their warehouse. So, and I bring that example back up into play because I think it's critically important in our conversation in aerospace that their job is to make sure that people are ready to fly. And their job is not to run the most efficient warehouse, although they need to do that, and they have a lot of people that are expert in the field. Many times it takes those outside eyes of engineers coming in and having the conversation to go, well, did you know, right? And so that's our job. Our job is most of the time, people will come in the door, they'll get to meet Rob's staff, and then we will plan to parachute a few engineers in and really put the problem under a microscope so that we can help the client as quickly as we can.
Well, from an aviation perspective, William, thank you for that explanation. From an aviation perspective, in the early era of aircraft manufacturing, a company like Cessna would make virtually all their own parts, and they would assemble them within their own spaces, and then over time, and then this is the same thing that happened at Airbus and Boeing and Gulfstream and all the other manufacturers, is they will outsource components and modules that will be incorporated into their aircraft. They will come in and then they will assemble everything together once it gets there. For instance, the fuselages of Boeing aircraft are built in Wichita, Kansas, not in Seattle, where the aircraft are actually assembled. And the engines are built by Rolls-Royce in Connecticut or England, and then they're all shipped over. Everything comes together like a big jigsaw puzzle. And now the jigsaw puzzle has really gotten disorganized due to the pandemic. And any company that is having problems keeping up with your inventory and your tracking of your shipments should reach out to Surgere, because they offer a real-time solution that can help you with your efficiencies. And William, is there a phone number that they can call to reach your staff that you want to give out, or a website?
Yeah, I think the best would be to connect with us through our website, which is just www.surgere.com. And on that website, they'll find, there's a web form so they can connect with us directly via email. Our phone number is there, but I would direct all the general interest to that website, surgere.com.
Well, supply chain's the hottest two words in America right now for the economy. You guys are in the right place with a solution at the right time when we need it most. And if you look on the Atlanta Aero Club website, you'll see that we have a link to Surgere. So if you're interested in getting more information, you can Google them, you can go to their website, or you can click on their link on the Atlanta Aero Club website. I suggest more aviation companies look closely at Surgere to help your efficiencies and to keep your production up during what is now the hottest aviation marketplace in corporate aviation in history. Thank you so much, gentlemen.
Thank you.
It was great talking
Appreciate
with
it.
you.
It was a pleasure. Have a great day.
You as well.
Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thank you.